The rain drummed against the cracked pavement of Fifth Street Market, each drop creating tiny rivers that carried away the day's dreams of countless vendors. Among them, 8-year-old Emma clutched a small cardboard box close to her chest, her thin jacket doing little to shield her from the October chill. Inside the box, wrapped in tissue paper she'd carefully saved from last Christmas, were 12 chocolate chip cookies she'd baked that morning, while her mother slept fitfully in the next room. "Please buy my cookies," Emma whispered to the first passerby, her voice barely audible above the city's evening rush. The woman in the expensive coat glanced down, her expression softening for just a moment before she hurried past, her heels clicking against the wet concrete like a countdown timer. Emma's small fingers traced the edge of the handwritten sign taped to her box. "Homemade cookies, $2 each. Mom is sick. Please help." The words had taken her 20 minutes to write, erasing and rewriting each letter until her pencil wore down to a stub. She'd wanted to add more, to explain about the mounting medical bills, the empty refrigerator, the way her mother's cough had grown worse each night, but the cardboard only had so much space. The marketplace buzzed with its usual evening energy. Vendors called out their final bargains of the day while customers hurried past, eager to escape the weather. The aroma of fresh bread wafted from Romano's bakery across the street, mixing with the scent of roasted coffee and the exhaust from idling cars. Emma's stomach growled, reminding her that she'd given her breakfast to her mother and skipped lunch entirely. "What you got there, sweetheart?" asked Mrs. Patterson, the flower vendor who'd been watching Emma from her stall. Her weathered hands arranged the last of her roses while her kind eyes focused on the young girl. "Cookies," Emma replied, opening the box with trembling hands. "I made them myself. They're really good, I promise." Mrs. Patterson's heart ached as she looked at the carefully arranged cookies. Each one was slightly different in shape, some a little burnt around the edges, others perfectly golden. But what struck her most was the love evident in every imperfect curve. "How much, honey?" $2 each, Emma said, then quickly added, "But if you can't afford it, I can take less. My mom always says kindness is more valuable than money." The flower vendor reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. "I'll take 3, but you keep the change." She selected the 3 most perfectly round cookies, knowing that Emma would want to save her best ones for other customers. Emma's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Patterson. This means everything." As the flower vendor bit into the first cookie, her face lit up with genuine surprise. "These are absolutely delicious. Your mother taught you well. She used to be a baker," Emma said proudly, though her voice caught slightly. "Before she got sick, she worked at the fancy hotel downtown, making desserts for important people. She taught me all her secrets." The rain began to fall harder, and Emma pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. The cardboard box was starting to soften from the moisture, and she worried about her remaining cookies getting ruined. Several more people had passed by, some stopping to read her sign, others averting their eyes as if her desperation might be contagious. A young mother with a stroller paused nearby, her toddler pointing excitedly at Emma's cookies. "Mama, cookies." The child squealed, clapping his chubby hands. Emma's face brightened with hope. "Would you like to try one? They're made with real vanilla extract and the best chocolate chips I could find." The mother looked at her son's eager face, then at Emma's hopeful expression. "How much?" $2, Emma said, then hesitated. "But for your little boy, I could do $1.50. The mother smiled and handed over the money, watching as Emma carefully selected the most perfectly shaped cookie for the child. The toddler took a big bite and immediately broke into a grin, chocolate smearing across his cheeks. "These are incredible," the mother said, tasting a small piece. "You're very talented." Emma beamed with pride, but her joy was quickly dampened by the approaching footsteps of Officer Rodriguez, the beat cop who regularly patrolled the market. She'd seen him move other young vendors along, and her heart sank as he approached. "What are you doing out here, young lady?" Officer Rodriguez asked, his tone gentle but official. "It's getting late, and this weather isn't safe for someone your age." Emma's voice trembled as she explained about her mother's illness and their need for money. Officer Rodriguez listened intently, his expression growing more concerned with each word. He'd seen plenty of hardship in his years on the force, but something about this little girl's determination touched him deeply. "Tell you what," he said, reaching into his wallet. "I'll buy your last 6 cookies, but only if you promise to head home after this. Your mother needs you safe more than she needs the money." Emma nodded eagerly, grateful beyond words. As she carefully counted out the remaining cookies, she thought about her mother waiting at home, probably worrying about where she'd gone. Grace had been sleeping when Emma left, exhausted from another night of coughing, and Emma had left a note saying she'd be back soon. The rain continued to fall as Emma packed up her empty box, her small hands now clutching $23, more money than she'd seen in weeks. It wasn't enough to cover her mother's medicine, but it was a start. As she walked home through the darkening streets, Emma whispered a prayer of gratitude for the kindness of strangers and held onto hope that tomorrow would bring more miracles. The old apartment building loomed ahead, its windows glowing warmly against the gray evening sky. Emma climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their small apartment, her heart both heavy with worry and light with the day's small victories. She didn't know that her life was about to change forever, that a wealthy businessman named Marcus had been watching her brave display from his car window, and that her courage would inspire him to become the hero she never knew she needed. Marcus Wellington sat in his black sedan, engine idling as his driver waited for the light to change. Through the rain-streaked window, he watched the small figure of Emma disappearing into the apartment building across the street. He'd witnessed the entire scene at the marketplace, the young girl's desperate attempts to sell cookies, the kindness of strangers, and her unwavering determination despite the harsh weather. Something about her reminded him of his own daughter, Lily, who was safely tucked away in their mansion on the hill, never having to worry about where her next meal would come from. The contrast struck him like a physical blow. Here was a child, barely older than his own, shouldering responsibilities that would crush most adults. "Sir," his driver, James, glanced in the rearview mirror. "The light's green. Pull over here," Marcus said quietly, his mind already forming a plan. "I need to make a stop." James raised an eyebrow but complied, parking near the apartment building. Marcus stepped out into the rain, his expensive overcoat immediately darkening with moisture. He looked up at the building, 5 stories of weathered brick, fire escapes clinging to its sides like metal ivy, windows that had seen better decades. Inside apartment 3B, Emma burst through the door, shaking raindrops from her hair. "Mom, I'm home," she called softly, not wanting to wake Grace if she was finally getting some rest. Grace emerged from their tiny bedroom, wrapped in a faded blue robe that had once been her pride and joy. Her face was pale, dark circles under her eyes, speaking to countless sleepless nights, but she managed a weak smile when she saw her daughter. "There's my brave girl," Grace whispered, her voice hoarse. "I was worried when I found your note. Where did you go in this weather?" Emma's face lit up as she pulled the crumpled bills from her jacket pocket. "I sold cookies, Mom. All of them, look." She spread the money on their small kitchen table like it was treasure from a pirate's chest. Grace's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the money, then at her daughter's proud face. "Oh, sweetheart, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Emma interrupted gently. "You always take care of me. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Grace pulled her daughter into a careful embrace, mindful of the persistent pain in her chest. "What did I do to deserve such an amazing daughter?" Their tender moment was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Both mother and daughter froze. They rarely had visitors, and never this late in the evening. Grace moved protectively in front of Emma as she approached the door. "Who is it?" Grace called through the thin wood. "My name is Marcus Wellington," came a warm, deep voice from the hallway. "I saw your daughter at the market today. I'd like to help, if you let me." Grace and Emma exchanged glances. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Grace thought she might have seen it in the newspaper's business section. Cautiously, she opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. Through the narrow gap, she saw a well-dressed man in his late 30s, with kind brown eyes and an expensive suit that was now damp from the rain. He didn't look threatening, but Grace had learned to be careful. "What kind of help?" Grace asked suspiciously. Marcus held up a business card, sliding it through the gap. I own Wellington Industries. I saw Emma's courage today, and I'd like to discuss a proposition that might benefit both of you. Grace looked at the card, heavy paper stock with embossed lettering. Wellington Industries was one of the city's largest companies. She'd cleaned their downtown offices years ago, before Emma was born. I don't understand, Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper. Your daughter has something special, Marcus said gently. Not just her baking skills. Though those cookies were incredible, she has heart, determination, and a work ethic that most adults lack. I'd like to help with your medical expenses in exchange for Emma teaching my daughter some valuable life lessons. Grace's knees nearly buckled. Medical expenses, the very thing that kept her awake at night. The crushing weight that made her feel like she was drowning. We can't accept charity. It's not charity, Marcus said quickly. It's an investment. My daughter Lily has everything money can buy, but she's missing something important. The understanding of hard work and compassion that Emma possesses naturally. Emma tugged on her mother's robe. Mom, can we at least listen to what he wants to say? After a long moment, Grace unlatched the chain and opened the door wider. Marcus stepped inside. Immediately struck by the apartment's Spartanness, the furniture was old but meticulously clean. Everything organized with the precision of someone who couldn't afford to lose track of anything. Please, sit down, Grace offered, gesturing to their small couch. Can I get you some tea? It's not much, but tea would be lovely, Marcus said, settling carefully on the worn cushions. He noticed Emma watching him intently from the kitchen doorway. No longer the scared child from the marketplace, but a protective daughter evaluating a potential threat to her mother. As Grace prepared the tea with shaking hands, Marcus explained his proposal. His daughter Lily was 10 years old, privileged but lacking direction. She'd been asking for a real friend instead of the carefully curated playmates from her private school. I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate, Marcus clarified quickly. Just occasional visits where the girls could spend time together. Emma could teach Lily about cooking, responsibility, and the value of hard work. In return, I'd cover all your medical expenses and ensure Emma has access to better educational opportunities. Grace set down the steaming cups with hands that trembled slightly. That's incredibly generous, but I don't understand why you do this for strangers. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into his tea. 5 years ago, I lost my wife to cancer. During her treatment, I met families who couldn't afford the care she needed. I've been looking for meaningful ways to help ever since. Today, watching Emma's determination reminded me of why that matters. Emma stepped forward, her young voice filled with wisdom. Beyond her years, what if your daughter doesn't like me? I'm not fancy like her friends probably are. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile Grace had seen from him. I think she'll love you, and I think you'll find you have more in common than you expect. Grace looked at her daughter, seeing the hope blooming in her eyes. The money from the cookies wouldn't even cover a single doctor's visit, let alone the tests and treatments she needed. But accepting help from a stranger felt like stepping off a cliff. Could we think about it? Grace asked finally. This is all very sudden. Of course, Marcus said, standing and reaching into his jacket. He pulled out an envelope and set it gently on the coffee table. This is for Emma's remarkable courage today. She earned it. Grace opened the envelope and gasped. Inside were 10 crisp $100 bills, more money than she'd seen in months. I can't accept this, she whispered. You're not accepting it, Marcus said gently. Emma earned it. I'm simply a customer who believes in paying fair prices for exceptional products and service. As Marcus prepared to leave, he turned back at the door. Grace, your daughter is extraordinary. Don't let pride prevent her from having the opportunities she deserves. After he left, mother and daughter sat in stunned silence, staring at the money on their table. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside their small apartment, something had shifted. Hope, fragile and tentative, began to take root. Grace pulled Emma close, breathing in the sweet scent of her daughter's hair. What do you think, baby? Should we trust him? Emma looked up at her mother with eyes full of possibility. I think sometimes heroes don't wear capes, Mom. Sometimes they just show up when you need them most. That night, as Grace tucked Emma into bed, She allowed herself to imagine a future where her daughter wouldn't have to worry about adult problems. Maybe, just maybe, this stranger's kindness was the beginning of something beautiful. Dr. Eleanor Rivera had seen countless patients walk through the doors of St. Mary's Medical Center. But when Grace and Emma arrived that Tuesday morning, something about their quiet dignity caught her attention. Grace clutched a folder of medical records with one hand and held Emma's small fingers with the other, both of them looking overwhelmed by the bustling hospital environment. "Mrs. Thompson," Dr. Rivera called from the doorway of examination room 7, her warm brown eyes immediately putting Grace at ease. "I'm Dr. Rivera. Mr. Wellington spoke with me about your case." Grace's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She still felt uncomfortable accepting Marcus's help, even though Emma had convinced her it was the right thing to do. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice, doctor. Please, call me Elena," the doctor said, ushering them into the bright, clean room. She was younger than Grace had expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with prematurely silver hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and laugh lines that spoke of someone who found joy, even in difficult circumstances. Emma settled into the chair beside the examination table, her legs swinging nervously. She'd insisted on coming to every appointment, determined to understand her mother's condition and be part of the solution. Dr. Rivera reviewed Grace's previous medical records, her expression growing more serious as she read. "How long have you been experiencing these symptoms?" she asked gently. "About 8 months," Grace admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe longer. I kept thinking it would get better on its own." "And the coughing, the fatigue," Grace nodded, unconsciously placing a hand over her chest. "It's gotten worse lately. Some mornings I can barely get out of bed." Emma reached for her mother's free hand, squeezing it tightly. "She tries to hide it from me, but I hear her coughing at night. Sometimes she can't catch her breath." Dr. Rivera's heart ached as she watched the role reversal between mother and daughter. She'd seen it too often, children forced to grow up too quickly when illness struck their families. "Grace, I'm going to be honest with you," Dr. Rivera said, pulling up a chair so she could sit at eye level. "Based on your symptoms and the preliminary tests you've had, I suspect you may have a condition called pulmonary fibrosis. It's a serious illness, but it's treatable, especially when caught early." Emma's grip on her mother's hand tightened. "What does that mean? Can you fix it?" Dr. Rivera smiled at the young girl's directness. "It means your mother's lungs have some scarring that makes it hard for her to breathe properly. We can't cure it completely, but we can definitely help her feel much better and live a normal life." Grace felt tears welling up in her eyes. For months, she'd been terrified that her symptoms meant something far worse. What kind of treatment? A combination of medications to reduce inflammation and slow the progression, plus respiratory therapy to strengthen your lungs, Dr. Rivera explained. "I also want to run some additional tests to rule out other conditions and get a complete picture of what we're dealing with." Nurse Patricia knocked softly and entered with a wheelchair. She was a motherly woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands that had comforted thousands of patients over her 20-year career. "This is Patricia," Dr. Rivera said. "She's going to take you down for your chest x-rays and blood work. Emma, would you like to come along?" Emma nodded eagerly, not wanting to leave her mother's side. As they made their way through the hospital corridors, Patricia chatted easily with both of them, explaining each procedure in terms Emma could understand. "Your daughter is very brave," Patricia told Grace as they waited for the x-ray technician. "Not many children handle hospital visits this well. She's been my rock through all of this," Grace said, stroking Emma's hair. "I don't know what I would have done without her, and I don't know what I would have done without you," Emma replied, hugging her mother carefully. The tests took most of the morning, but Dr. Rivera had blocked out extra time to ensure Grace received thorough care. When they returned to the examination room, Marcus was waiting with a young girl who could only be his daughter Lily. Lily Wellington was everything Emma had expected. Perfectly groomed blonde hair in neat braids, expensive clothes that looked like they'd never seen a playground, and an air of uncertainty that suggested she wasn't used to places like hospitals. "Grace, Emma, I'd like you to meet my daughter Lily," Marcus said, his voice warm with pride. "Lily, This is the remarkable young baker I told you about." Emma stepped forward shyly, suddenly conscious of her faded jeans and well-worn sneakers. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi," Lily replied, then surprised everyone by adding, "My dad says you make the best cookies in the world. Could you teach me how?" Emma's face brightened immediately. "Sure. It's not that hard once you know the secrets." While the girls began chatting about baking techniques, Dr. Rivera returned with Grace's test results. Her expression was cautiously optimistic as she clipped the x-rays to the light board. "Good news," she announced. "The scarring in your lungs is present, but not as extensive as I feared. With proper treatment, you should see significant improvement within a few months." Grace's knees went weak with relief. Marcus steadied her gently, his own face showing the emotional investment he'd developed in their situation. "What does that mean for day-to-day life?" Grace asked, initially. "You'll need to take it easy while we adjust your medications," Dr. Rivera explained. "But I expect you'll gradually regain your energy and strength. The most important thing is catching this now, before it progresses further." Emma whooped with joy, causing several nurses in the hallway to smile at the sound of pure happiness echoing through the usually somber medical wing. Over the following weeks, Grace began her treatment regimen under Dr. Rivera's careful supervision. The medications made her feel nauseated at first, but Patricia taught Emma how to prepare simple foods that would help settle her mother's stomach. "You're a natural caregiver," Patricia told Emma during one of their visits. "Have you ever thought about becoming a nurse or doctor?" Emma's eyes lit up with possibility. "Could I really do that? With your compassion and determination?" "Absolutely," Dr. Rivera said, overhearing their conversation. "Medicine needs people who understand what it's like to worry about someone you love." Meanwhile, the friendship between Emma and Lily began to blossom in unexpected ways. Lily visited their apartment twice a week, marveling at how Emma could create delicious meals from simple ingredients, and how she managed household responsibilities that Lily had never even considered. "At my house, people do everything for me," Lily confided to Emma one afternoon as they baked chocolate chip cookies together. "I never realized how much work it takes to take care of someone." "It's not work when you love them," Emma replied, carefully measuring flour. "It's just what you do." Dr. Rivera monitored Grace's progress closely, adjusting medications and celebrating each small improvement. After 6 weeks of treatment, Grace's persistent cough had diminished significantly, and she was sleeping through the night for the first time in months. "I feel like myself again," Grace told Dr. Rivera during a follow-up appointment. "I forgot what it was like to take a deep breath without pain." "Your improvement has been remarkable," Dr. Rivera agreed. "You've been an ideal patient, following instructions, taking medications consistently, and maintaining a positive attitude despite everything." Emma beamed with pride at her mother's progress, but Dr. Rivera noticed something else. The young girl looked healthier too. The stress lines around her eyes had softened, and she'd gained a few much-needed pounds. "It's amazing what happens when children can be children again," Patricia observed, watching Emma and Lily giggle over a medical magazine's pictures of unusual x-rays. As autumn turned to winter, Grace's health continued to improve steadily. She was able to take longer walks with Emma, cook more elaborate meals, and even started talking about returning to work. But more importantly, the constant fear that had shadowed their lives for months finally began to lift. "You saved my life," Grace told Dr. Rivera during what would be their last weekly appointment. "No," Dr. Rivera replied with a gentle smile. "You saved your own life by having the courage to seek help, and you have quite a support system." Looking at Emma chatting animatedly with Lily about their plans to open a lemonade stand, Grace had to agree. Sometimes healing came not just from medicine, but from the unexpected kindness of strangers who chose to become family. Spring arrived with a burst of cherry blossoms and fresh possibilities. Grace stood in the empty storefront on Maple Street, sunlight streaming through the large windows as she tried to envision her dream taking shape. The space was small but perfect, just big enough for a few tables, a display case, and the kind of warm, welcoming atmosphere she'd always imagined creating. "What do you think, sweetheart?" Grace asked Emma, who was spinning in circles in the middle of the empty room, her arms outstretched like she was trying to embrace all the potential the space held. "It's perfect, Mom," Emma exclaimed, coming to a dizzy stop. "I can see it all. The smell of fresh bread, people laughing. Maybe some flowers in the windows like Mrs. Patterson suggested." Marcus emerged from the back room where he'd been inspecting the kitchen equipment with the previous owner. His sleeves were rolled up, his expensive tie loosened, and there was a smudge of dust on his cheek that made him look more approachable than his usual polished businessman appearance. "The ovens are in excellent condition," he reported, pulling out his phone to show them pictures. "Professional grade, perfect for what you're planning. The previous owner really took care of this place." Grace bit her lip nervously. Even with Marcus's generous loan and the money she'd slowly saved from Emma's cookie sales, opening a bakery felt like stepping into an impossible dream. "Are you sure about this? What if it doesn't work? What if people don't come?" Lily bounced up from where she'd been sketching possible logo designs at one of the fold-out tables they'd brought. Over the past few months, the shy, privileged little girl had transformed into Emma's confident partner in all their adventures. "Are you kidding?" Lily said with the enthusiasm only a 10-year-old could muster. "Emma's cookies are famous. Half my class begs their parents to drive by your apartment building hoping to catch her selling them." Emma blushed at the praise. Word had indeed spread about her weekend cookie stands, and she'd developed a small but devoted following of customers who sought out her treats. What had started as desperation had evolved into genuine entrepreneurial spirit. "Besides," Marcus added gently, "you won't be doing this alone. You have a whole team of people who believe in you." As if summoned by his words, the front door chimed as Mrs. Patterson entered with an armload of potted herbs, basil, rosemary, thyme, and mint. Behind her came Officer Rodriguez carrying a hand-painted sign that read Grace's Garden Bakery. In cheerful green letters, "Every bakery needs fresh herbs," Mrs. Patterson announced, setting the pots on the windowsill where they immediately brightened the space. "And every business needs good security. Officer Rodriguez here has volunteered to make this street part of his regular patrol. It's the least I can do," Officer Rodriguez said, propping the sign against the wall so they could see how it would look. "Emma's courage that day in the rain inspired my whole precinct. We're all rooting for you." Dr. Rivera arrived next, having closed her practice early for the occasion. She carried a basket filled with what looked like medical supplies, but when Grace peered inside, she found measuring cups, mixing bowls, and a professional-grade thermometer. "For precise baking," Dr. Rivera explained with a grin. "After months of watching you follow medication schedules to the minute, I figured you'd appreciate tools that help you be exact with recipes." Even Nurse Patricia had come, bringing homemade curtains she'd sewn in soft yellow fabric printed with tiny teacups. "Every place that serves comfort food needs to feel like home," she said. Already measuring the windows. Emma watched all these adults who had become so important to their lives bustling around the empty bakery, each contributing something special to make her mother's dream come true. It felt magical, like something from one of the fairy tales Grace used to read to her before bedtime. "Mom," Emma whispered, tugging on Grace's sleeve, "look what we did. Look what you built." Grace's eyes filled with tears as she surveyed the scene. 6 months ago, she'd been sick, scared, and barely able to provide for her daughter. Now she was surrounded by people who'd chosen to become family, preparing to open a business that felt like the culmination of everything she'd ever hoped for. Marcus approached them quietly, holding to small wrapped packages, opening day gifts. He said, handing one to each of them. Emma tore into hers with typical child enthusiasm, revealing a professional chef's apron sized perfectly for her small frame. Embroidered across the front in elegant script were the words Emma Thompson, head baker in training. Grace opened hers more carefully, gasping when she saw an identical apron with Grace Thompson, owner and master baker, stitched in the same beautiful lettering. "Now it's official," Marcus said softly. "You're both real bakers." Lily clapped her hands excitedly. "Put them on. We need to take pictures for the grand opening." As mother and daughter tied on their matching aprons, the transformation was immediate. They stood taller, smiled brighter, and for the first time in months, Grace looked like a woman who knew exactly where she belonged. "All right, everyone," Grace announced, her voice stronger than it had been in ages. "Who wants to help us bake our first official batch of Grace's Garden cookies?" The next few hours flew by in a whirlwind of flour, laughter, and the kind of controlled chaos that only comes from too many enthusiastic helpers in one kitchen. Dr. Rivera proved surprisingly adept at measuring ingredients, while Officer Rodriguez discovered he had a talent for decorating. Mrs. Patterson directed herb placement with the precision of an artist, and Nurse Patricia seemed to anticipate everyone's needs before they even realized what they were looking for. Marcus found himself relegated to cleanup duty, but he didn't mind. Watching Grace work in her element, confident, graceful, completely in control, he felt something shifting in his chest. She wasn't the desperate, frightened woman he'd first encountered outside her apartment building. She was strong, capable, and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with spirit. "Dad," Lily whispered, appearing at his elbow with flour in her hair and frosting on her nose. "Are you staring at Emma's mom?" Marcus felt his cheeks redden. "I was just observing the baking process." Lily rolled her eyes with the exaggerated patience of a child explaining something obvious to a clueless adult. "Dad, it's okay to like her. She's really nice, and she makes Emma happy, and Emma makes me happy, so it's like a whole circle of happiness." Before Marcus could respond to his daughter's surprisingly wise observation, Grace called everyone to gather round the cooling racks where dozens of perfect golden cookies waited. "I want to thank all of you," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. "6 months ago, Emma and I were alone and scared. Today, we're surrounded by family and about to open our own business. Dreams really do come true, but only when you have people who believe in them with you." Emma stepped forward, holding a cookie sheet decorated with extra care. "This one's special," she announced solemnly. "It's our first official Grace's Garden cookie, and I think Mr. Marcus should have it, since he started everything." Marcus accepted the cookie with the gravity it deserved, taking a careful bite while everyone watched expectantly. His eyes closed as the familiar flavors, vanilla, chocolate, and something indefinably warm that he'd come to associate with Emma's baking, filled his senses. "Perfect," he declared, and meant it in more ways than one. As the sun began to set through the bakery windows, casting everything in golden light, Emma looked around at all the faces that had become so dear to her. Her mother was healthy and happy. They had a real home for their business, and she had more friends than she'd ever dreamed possible. But most importantly, she could see something new blooming between her mother and Marcus, something tender and careful and full of possibility. Emma smiled to herself, already planning the special cookies she'd bake for their wedding someday. After all, every good love story needed the perfect dessert.